So welcome back, and today we get to talk about a very special plant group or a plant family that is of great value here in California, or what is known as the California Floristic Province, because it is a plant that has uh, its center of distribution here in California, and so we're going to find the majority of some of the species here. And so I would like to start by sharing a small trip that many years ago we did to an island looking for one of these plants. And so the image that you see here shows you the end of the peninsula looking into this island over here. And it has some of the members which are going to be buckwheat members of this family, as well as the Dahlias and several other California native plants. And so this is Ensenada, and it's going to be Isla Todos Santos. And so we were here at the tip of this peninsula overlooking the island. So we had to take a small boat onto the island. The purpose of this trip was to find a special buckwheat that only grows on this island, or a variety of a buckwheat. And so we got to the island, and when we got to the platform, we found a lot of nesting birds. And so the islands off of the coast of California are going to be very important for nesting birds. And so we decided to just go around and look for that plant. And we had to go around the entire island to come to this area. That's where we found the plant. Now realizing that if we would have made a left instead of a right, we could have found the plant within a few minutes rather than several hours. But it was an adventure. It was exploration, and we were able to find the seagulls' chicklings. So the babies, they are barely hatching or just kind of waiting for mom to bring them food. And there's the boat. And so from here, if we would have made the left, we would have come to this area where we were able to find the buckwheat. And so here's the plant in its natural habitat. And so they were able to collect it and catalog it. And this was because there was a grad student out of Rancho Santa Ana that needed the information and the plan for the project. So the plant, the buckwheat, is a member of the Polygonaceae, or the buckwheat family, as is commonly known. And it's distributed throughout the world, but as mentioned before, buckwheat, Eriogonum, is going to have its center of distribution in the California Floristic Province. From there, it's going to fan out. But there's going to be members that are going to be spread out throughout the world, as you can see with the map. And some of them are going to be important for food, and many of them are going to be important for wildlife and or also for just ornamental value. So it is a dicot family, a broadleaf, 43 genera, 1100 plus species. Obviously, we're not going to concentrate on many of them. I'll show you a photograph of some of the wild individuals that I have found in my travels and my explorations. And so here is some of the smaller ones. So they're going to range from small herbaceous type plants to even vines and shrubs and a few trees. And so when you are hiking here in Southern California, it's going to be very common to see them. Many of them are just going to be camouflage with the background, such as this very tiny buckwheat. So here's the leaves, and there is going to be a very large cluster or branching cluster of flowers, and there's going to be very tiny blossoms. The blossoms, although puny or small, when combined, they will create a nice display, and you may be able to see them, or as you're hiking, you might need to pay a little bit more attention, because some of these plants can also be referred to as stomach crawlers, in that you're going to have to crawl on your stomach to be able to see them, so that you're going to be close to the ground. But on some of the larger shrubs, or some of the shrubs, when they are in bloom, they can be quite colorful. as we can see with this individual that although it has very tiny blossoms, collectively with the flower spike, they can be quite showy. And the same thing here, we have hundreds of blossoms that are open at one single point, and the blossoms together creates this little cluster or this little ball, and you can see the open flowers, blossoms. And see, here's a yellow one with a close-up of how the flowers are going to look. The flowers are not going to be too sophisticated. They're not going to be uh, too complex as we've seen with other plants. So the other thing that is going to be very common is that the flowers will, or the blossoms will remain when they're dry attached to the plant. And so this may give the plant somewhat of a dead feeling. The plant may look dead during the time when in California it's going to be summer, when it's going to go dormant because of the lack of water. And so it is within these remnants of the blossoms that you may find the fruit of the plant. One of the things that it makes many of the herbaceous plant distinguishable is going to be something that's going to be unique to the family. And that's going to be what is known as the ochrea, which is just going to be an extension of this uh, the stipules that is going to kind of be papery. And so you have here the node with the leaf and the branching or the lateral branch, and you have the main stem. And so this is going to be something that you can look for if you happen to find some herbaceous plants and you might not know what it is. Look at this. If it has this ochrea or this papery covering, then you know that it is a member of the buckwheat family. And here's another image showing you just that. So not all of them will have it, but many of the herbaceous ones will. Pollination is going to be pretty much any insect, any animal that wants a meal. So here's a fly that happens to be gorging on the nectar and the pollen. Since the flowers don't really have any big sophistication, they're just going to have a big display. The blossoms are going to create a very good landing platform. So it's going to be very easy for some of those insects to just walk around. In the process of walking around, they're going to get completely covered with pollen, and in the process they're going to pollinate the different blossoms. So here is a leaf cutter bee. This is from the wild. It's in Catalina Island that I got this photograph of the bee also drinking the nectar and taking the pollen. And even a tarantula hawk wasp, one of the biggest wasps around Southern California. I have seen it in the wild feeding on many buckwheats. And here's one that I was able to grab the photograph. And beetles. We don't really think of beetles as a good pollinator for plants or natural pollinators. We always think about pollination as and associated with bees, but beetles are also very good and very important pollinators. So here's a beetle that it's going to go from flower to flower, and it's going to bring about pollination. So beetles are going to be important. The fruit for the members of this family is going to be an akene, which is just a single seed fruit. Think about it as a type of sunflower seed because the sunflower seed is also an akene. And so, although many people may consider this the seed of the plant, yes, in fact, the seed is inside, but this is actually the fruit. And so when we look at several other species, as mentioned, there's going to be worldwide distribution. So here is a vine by the name of Antigonum, which is going to be used for ornamental purposes. So here's in full flower, just kind of draping over a fence here in Southern California. And here's one that's just kind of cascading over a cinder block wall. So this are going to be some of the larger vines that you may find. And so here's the flower, the close-up of the blossoms, showing you that they could be quite nice. And here is the fruit that inside has one seed. And then there's going to be fallopia, and although in the literature this is considered as a weed in certain parts of the United States or certain parts of the world, that has not happened here in Southern California. I wish it would, because it does create a very nice display. So here's the only one that I've been able to find in Long Beach, California, showing you the flowers and how nice and colorful it can look. And here's the other view from this one. A few others that may be a little bit weedy, and I'm going to say weedy very loosely. Rumex is going to be found in wet areas. Usually in some of the naturalized or not wild areas. Here's the flowers, very small, as mentioned. So there's my fingernail just to show you the scale. And you can see the akene or the fruit from some of the flowers that have gone and spent. Or we have the ribbon plant, Homalocladium, that it has the stems that now carry out photosynthesis. The leaves are going to fall off early. So here are the leaves at the node. And so we have the node where the leaf come out, and that can branch into another stem. And so here is some shot of the flowers, some of the achenes, and the very small flowers right here, including a lot of stems. So this is another one that has ornamental value. Or Malembekia, the wire vine, here being used in the landscape as a small ground cover. And it will have very small flowers and even has very small cane or fruit. The fruit is edible. You will need a lot to make some flour or make some a decent meal. But for the most part, the akin is going to be edible on most of the species. Where we have Persicaria, commonly known as pink clover, no relations with the real clover that's in the bean family, but it has some similarity as far as the flower, and that's where the common name comes from. And you can see that ochrea that I mentioned before on the stem on top of the node, and here's the very tiny blossoms. And we also have a few more that can be a little bit taller, very uh, here used in the landscape, and it has a very nice display of flowers right there. And many of them can be eaten and are being used by for food. So this is commonly known as Vietnamese cilantro. And it is part of the Vietnamese diet, cuisine, not diet, but cuisine. So if you happen to go to some Vietnamese restaurant, you may be served something that has this herb, or sometimes it just comes on the side so that you can enjoy it. So that will be Persicaria odorata, the uh, Vietnamese cilantro, as it's commonly referred to. And here's where it was for sale in some of the markets that cater to the Southeast Asian community. And here's where they were served at a Vietnamese restaurant on top of some seafood. And or we also have Polygonum. Here's the flowers with kind of blue pollen. Or we have Rheum, which is the rhubarb. And this is going to be something that the Europeans would know because it is more of a cold climate. It doesn't really well grow for us here in our hot Southern California. People try it, but it's very difficult. San Francisco, north of San Francisco, may be a much better climate where it gets a little bit colder, a little bit more misty, and a little bit more humid. But Europe, that's where the plant comes from. It's been cultivated for many years. And here's where there's a plant in a container. And here's when it was blooming and I was able to get the flowers. But it is the petiole of the leaf, the stalk of the leaf, that it is eaten. And you will find it for sale in many markets for making, obviously, rhubarb pie and a bunch of other good things. But the one plant that does have some value for calories for people is Phagopyrum, which is the buckwheat. But this is the Asian buckwheat. This is not the California native. And so it has been selected, it has been cultivated, and it is known to produce a much larger akin, that it is commercially cultivated and it is sold in bags. And so, being a lot larger, yes, you can grind it up. Yes, they do sell flour of buckwheat. And for the people that cannot digest gluten or cannot eat regular wheat flour or looking for an alternative, it is often recommended that they try this buckwheat, that you can use it in exactly the same thing for making breads, cookies, and any other pastries that you might want. Uh, and a few of the trees, Cocolova, which is commonly known as sea grape. It's a tropical tree, so these photographs are coming from Florida. And here's where it was espalier against the wall, and it was flowering when I was there, and it also has the fruit. Now they're fleshy, they're supposed to be edible, but I never really got a chance because none of them were ripened when I was there. And so here's the fruit for that individual for sea grape. But now, if we come back to Southern California, we have Corisanti, which is a plant that you would find here along the Chaparral or the coastal sage area. And here's some of the photographs from Griffith Park right after the fire. This is Corysanthis staticoides. So it has very tiny blossoms that will dry out. And this is now during the summer when the plant has now fully or completely died out, but the flowers still remain. And the background is the hydro mulch that was placed after the fire in 1997. Sorry, 2007, after the fire, 2007. So it's a very nice plant. So here's the close-up of the flowers. And as I gone into Baja California, I found a few other Corysanthis. So this is just a species that I have never taken the time to identify it, but it's very nice. And here's a few others that I come across in my explorations and my travels, including this several photographs of that plant. And then Nemacollis, which is going to be a very small very small plant. Here, kind of camouflage on a river bed, just in between the gravel. It is an annual, so it's just grow and set the seeds and then it'll die. So there is finger pointing into some of the very tiny plants. And that's the photograph that I showed you in the beginning of some of the annual ones. And here we have uh, a marsh area that will also have some of this. So here's a few more of this one that was kind of hiding. So they could be also marsh plants. Or Hafordia, a genus endemic to Baja California. I don't think it makes it north of the border. So this is known as rabbit's purse because the fruits are going to be covered by this membrane, and inside you have the seeds. So very distinct. If you ever have the chance to go into Baja California, San Quintin area, you will be able to see them without a problem. Or the biggest one would be Eriogonum, the buckwheat, as we know refer to it. And here's a house in Claremont that has some of the bigger plants. So Eriogonum arborescens is native to Santa Cruz Island. So many of them are going to have be endemic to an area, the Channel Island, or some of them are going to have a much broader distribution. So here's the Santa Cruz Island buckwheat. Here's when it has the flowers or the blossoms and the leaves, and here's a much better display of it. And or Eriogonum fasciculatum. This is the common buckwheat, and this is spread out throughout most of the Western California, Western United States. So coastal areas, chaparral, you will find it almost in any hike. So here's an image where it is going to be the main or one of the most dominant plant in its community. Here is the buckwheat with some of the more iconic ice, white sage, images of how Southern California would have looked in the old days before the establishments of cities and towns and all these developments. So here's the blossoms for those, just creating tiny balls, and a few selections that have been uh, are used as ground cover. So here they're used as a mass ground cover at the Fullerton Arboretum. And here's at Rancho Santana Botanic Garden, now known as California Botanic Garden, where they are welcoming the public as they enter the garden. And they're alive. Keep in mind, California plants may, for the most part, will go dormant during the summer in lack of water. So here's in some of the hikes throughout Southern California where you might find them in full blood flower. Sometimes it's starting, sometimes ending. It changes every single month. Here's Eriogonum circumriforme, and this is native to the Santa Monica Mountains. And so this is from Griffith Park. And so I was able to find it for the first time in Griffith Park and record its extension into the eastern end of the Santa Monica Mountains. So there's the blossoms that are very, very tiny, and or Eriogonum elongatum, elongated, because it's going to have very long flower spikes. There's a close-up of the flowers. And once again from Griffith Park, growing in the wild, just on the edge of the hill, in pure decomposed granite. The plant is very happy. And here's was just a single seed, happened to just land in a crack, and it was had enough soil to germinate and grow, and it's doing very well. So here's the plants in the wild being very happy, and here's the close-up of the blossoms for those. And there's where there's a bunch more, and some of them in flower during the right time of the year. And here's the close-up of those blossoms. And in Carolina, so these are going to be endemic to Carolina Island, Eriogonum grande. So as you step up from the ferry from Long Beach, just look towards the hill or walk towards the hill and you'll see them. Some of the cliffs will have them, and that's just where these photographs were taken. So there's the blossoms and a few other selections that are more showy, more ornamental, and many people prefer over the previous one just because it's more colorful. So Ariadne Grande Rubescens, I believe is the name for this one, which is a reddish form. So it'll be very common to see in many gardens that have California native plants. Or Ariagonum grande testudinum. Again, this is from Baja California. This is the one that we went looking and that island on that island off of Ensenada. And so here it is with its native companions, agave shawi and manzanitas and Eucidia Ariagonum grande. So this is a variety that is only found on that island. And so here's the photograph of that plant, and we were able to find it in full flower to be able to catalog it. And here's a different Ariagonum. This one is from Malibu. So there's Malibu State Park right by the beach. And so here's one that was also being visited by a different type of beetle. That would be the pollinator, and you can see that, and including some other insect in the background. So here's where it was very happy and just off of the cliff in full flower. And there's the blossoms for this individual. Uh, and Campo More, just very close to the ocean, mixed with an ornamental plant known as ice plant. So this one right on the cliff, not on the cliff, but by the sand dunes or the sand, Malibu Beach. And there's the flowers for this and a close-up of those flowers. And just a few more where it has been used as ornamental. So this is Quail Botanic Garden. where they have was on display. So they want to show the public that California natives do look very nice and could have a place in many other gardens. So just to show you. And our Eriogonum fastigiatum, this is native to Baja California once again. Punta Colonet would be a very good place to find them. And they're going to be almost entirely covered with blossoms during the right season. So here's an assortment of blossoms. Very few leaves can be seen, and blossoms at all stages, some of them starting, some of them ending as the ones that are going to be brown. And so here is the close-up of those blossoms. So again, very unusual. I don't think it's in cultivation yet. So hopefully it'll be pretty soon. But in cultivation, we do have a Reagadum giganteum, variety giganteum. This is the Catalina Island lace. And it is going to be one of the largest buckwheats that you can find. So here it is when it's barely starting to blossom. That's when it's finished. So it'll retain the flower clusters. So here's when it's beginning to flower or when it's in full flower. And here's of hundreds of very tiny white blossoms. And there's the close-up of those. Here it is when it's at display at the Fullerton Arboretum, the Channel Island section. So this is will be another one that is endemic to the Channel Islands here in Southern California. And there's the close-up of the blossoms for those. And when it's in the summer, it's going to appear as if it's dead. It's going to just brown, and that's just going to be the leaves. Sorry, not the leaves, the blossoms, but the rest of the plant is should be okay. And even when it's full of brown blossoms, you may find a few that are still okay, as you can see here. And at Quail Botanic Garden, it's in full blossom here, and so it is quite a nice show and a very nice plant if you ever get a chance to grow it. And here's just for scale with a person close to it so you can see how big it can grow. And here's some more and a couple more just of the blossoms and the flowers. And here's another one in cultivation. Or here's another Eriogonum umbellatum, yellow flower. Eriogonum Kennedy. This is a small one. Again, as you venture in from North California to Southern California, you may find some of this endemics that may have a very small distribution, such as this one. Sometimes you can find them on top of the mountain, sometimes by the coast. They're all over the area. Or even in the desert. So this is Eriogonum inflatum. So if you ever venture into the desert in the early spring, this is commonly known as uh, desert pipe because, as the name says, inflatum, the stem or the flower spike is going to get swollen, and even when it's dead, it's still going to remain. And so it has a very big swollen area right where it begins to branch. And here is when they're dead. It's an annual plant, so they will die. So when they're dead, the flower clusters will remain, and it's a common sight for people to see when they are hiking or walking along the desert. And so here's the close-up of the flowers for this species. And there it is when it's very happy. It has a large number of leaves, and it has many, many flower clusters, and all of them with that little inflated area. And that's where the name comes from. So desert and just growing out of the road, just a crack along the road, and they're very happy. And here's just uh, buckwheat combined with some other desert wildflower. So you have those nice branching stems, and those have very tiny blossoms right there for close up. Or here we have another species, another desert type that I just happened to find on one of our hikes. I've not gotten the chance or given myself the time to identify it. Or another Nemacollis, possibly Nemacollis species. This one from my travels into South America. Or here's another one growing with monkey flower mimulus, and here's the blossoms for that individual. Or another one that is just growing. I think this might be San Luis Obispo, just growing with deerweed and monkey flower, just showing you there the close up of the blossoms and some more there. And some nice trail. This is in Bolsa Chica. So you have a trail of some of those plants that are commonly used for restoration area and to provide animals with habitat. And so here we have some other buckwheats that we use. And so one of the most important thing is going to be that rhubarb and rhubarb pie. So with this image and after going through a very important family for California native plants, I will thank you and say goodbye.